The year was 1912 when Thomas Hale, a seasoned lighthouse keeper, took over the St. Mary's Point Lighthouse, a structure perched on jagged cliffs above the relentless waves of the North Atlantic. The locals often whispered that the place was cursed. Ships had disappeared near its coast, and previous keepers either went mad or vanished without a trace. Thomas, a rational man of the sea, laughed at such tales. He believed in storms, not spirits. But he would soon learn that some storms aren't made of wind and rain. The first few weeks were quiet. Each evening, Thomas would light the beacon and watch it sweep across the ocean, its glow slicing through the endless fog. He logged every movement of the tides, every gust of wind, meticulous as ever. But one night, as the fog thickened to a white wall, he saw something that shouldn't have been there, a faint lantern light flickering on the shore far below. It swayed slowly, as if someone were walking along the rocks. He thought perhaps a shipwreck survivor had washed ashore. Taking his lantern, Thomas descended the spiral stairs, boots echoing in the hollow tower. But when he reached the rocky coast, the light was gone. The sea crashed violently, and the air felt unnaturally cold. Only footprints remained, wet, leading up toward the lighthouse door. His own door. That night, Thomas heard footsteps above him, but there was no one else stationed there. The sound circled the lantern room, slow and deliberate, until dawn broke. When he climbed up the next morning, the heavy iron door at the top was wide open, swinging in the wind. His logbook lay open on the desk, and someone had written inside with trembling hands, "Greater than I never left. Keep the light burning." Over the next nights, the disturbances grew worse. The foghorn began to sound on its own. The light flickered without cause, and sometimes in the reflection of the glass, Thomas saw a second figure beside him, a man in a soaked uniform with hollow eyes. Thomas tried to leave on the next supply boat, but storms battered the coast, making departure impossible. Trapped, he continued his duty, haunted by the presence that seemed to guard the lighthouse even more faithfully than he did. One morning, the supply crew finally arrived. They found the light still burning bright, but no sign of Thomas. Only his boots stood neatly by the stairs, and the logbook lay open to one final entry. Greater than "the sea calls me back." The keeper must always remain. To this day, fishermen claim that on foggy nights, you can see a lantern swaying along the shore, and a shadow moving in the beacon's light. The keeper who never left still guards his lighthouse, forever bound to the duty he could never abandon. In 1938, the Black Ridge Lighthouse was the last working beacon on the northern coast of Maine. It stood alone on a cliff, constantly battered by freezing winds and angry waves. The man assigned to it was Eleanor "Ellie" Grayson, one of the few female keepers of her time. She had lost her husband at sea years before and believed working the lighthouse would bring her closer to him, to the ocean that had taken everything she loved. From her first night, Ellie noticed something strange about the light itself. It hummed. A low, rhythmic vibration echoed through the glass chamber whenever the beacon rotated. She assumed it was the machinery, but as nights passed, the hum began to form patterns, pauses, tones, like whispers carried through metal. Sometimes when she stood too close, it sounded almost like a voice calling her name. "Ellie, Ellie." She ignored it at first, convincing herself it was the wind. But then the voice began to say more. One fog-heavy night, as lightning cracked over the horizon, the voice grew clearer. "You can bring him back, Ellie. You just have to listen." Her heart froze. She turned off the lamp to stop the sound, but the whispers continued, soft, pleading, resonating through the walls. The next morning she found saltwater puddles inside the tower, though every window was shut. Footprints trailed from the stairwell to the lamp room, bare, wet footprints circling the beacon. Days turned into weeks. Ellie's journal entries grew frantic. She wrote that the whispers now came from the ocean below, echoing up through the foghorn vents. Sometimes she thought she could see a shadowed figure standing in the waves, holding a lantern that swayed with the motion of the sea. At times it even looked like her husband, pale, waterlogged, but smiling faintly. Desperate, Ellie began to believe the voice. It told her to keep the light burning no matter what, to never let the flame die, for that's what tethered him between worlds. So she stopped sleeping, stopped eating, and kept watch every night, whispering back to the sea. Weeks later, when a storm hit the coast, the nearby village noticed something unsettling. The lighthouse beam had turned red, pulsing like a heartbeat through the fog. It stayed that way for 3 nights straight. When rescue boats finally reached the island, the light was still glowing, but no one was inside. All they found was Ellie's journal open beside the lamp, her handwriting trembling across the final page. "He's here now. The light brought him back. I have to stay with him in the dark." After that, the Black Ridge Lighthouse was sealed and automated. Yet fishermen still report that during certain storms, the beacon glows faint red again. And if you listen closely through the roar of the sea, you can hear a woman's voice whispering softly through the wind, calling out for someone who drowned long ago. In 1964, the Gray Harbor Lighthouse was manned by 2 keepers, Frank Mallory and Joseph Crane, both veterans of the sea who had served together in the Navy. The lighthouse stood miles from the nearest shore, accessible only by boat, surrounded by endless, restless water. Their duty was simple: keep the light burning. But as winter came and storms grew violent, the isolation began to gnaw at their minds. It started with small things. Frank woke one night to the sound of knocking on the lighthouse door. 3 slow taps. He opened it to nothing but black waves. The next night, Joseph claimed he heard the same thing, followed by the faint sound of someone climbing the stairs. They searched every floor, lanterns in hand, but found no one. Yet every time they returned to the sleeping quarters, the door would be ajar, swinging as if just pushed. By the end of the week, they began to notice that the light itself behaved strangely. When Frank went up to clean the lens, he swore he saw a face reflected in the glass, pale, gaunt, eyes hollow like 2 black stones. Joseph laughed at first until he saw it too. The reflection didn't match their movements. It lingered a moment longer, smiling faintly, even when they turned away. Tension between the 2 men grew as the days bled together. The radio stopped working, and the supply boat was delayed by storms. Trapped with nothing but wind and waves outside, they started keeping the light on in shifts. But during one of Frank's watches, the light suddenly went out. When Joseph rushed to the top to help, he found Frank standing motionless before the glass, staring out at the ocean. "It's calling," Frank muttered. "The light doesn't want to shine anymore." Joseph tried to shake him back to reason, but Frank shoved him aside and began descending the stairs, muttering to himself. Moments later, Joseph heard the heavy iron door below slam open, and then silence, followed by the faint echo of splashing water. Joseph searched the island until dawn, calling Frank's name. No sign, no body, only his coat floating near the rocks below. When Joseph went back inside, the lantern on the top level was already burning again, though he hadn't relit it. And in the fogged-up glass of the lens, a message had appeared as if traced by a finger. "Greater than the light must rest." By the time rescuers arrived 2 weeks later, Joseph was gone too. The light was off. The logs ended abruptly with his final entry. "Greater than he's in the light now. It hums when he speaks, Gray Harbor." Lighthouse was decommissioned the following year, left to rot against the elements. But sailors passing through its waters claim that sometimes, during a storm, the beacon flickers back to life, just once, before vanishing again. They say the light goes out whenever it claims another soul.